Hello, everyone. I wanted to go over the week 8 study questions. This is the first reading from Landsberg's The Experience of Death. Number 1, Landsberg claims that there are two theses contained in Voltaire's quote, "The human race is the only one that knows it must die, and it knows this only through its experience." What are these two theses? Well, they're right there. I just wanted you to spell it out in your own words. First thesis, human race is the only one that knows it must die, where Landsberg is making a claim that it is unique to human beings that, despite the fact that, as Jonas pointed out, all living things are mortal, the human race is the only one that lives with a consciousness of that mortality and of the necessity of its death. That is, a human being. And this right away kind of connects Landsberg with existentialism. Excuse me, my water's boiling. I'll be right back. I'm sorry. Yeah, this connects, I think, and these connections with existentialism will become more apparent later in the reading. That is, that it's characteristic of human beings that they are aware of the necessity of their own death, and so they're aware of their own finitude. Right away, this is a connection with Heidegger's idea that human existence is a being towards death. But that relationship with Heidegger is complicated, and I think, as we'll see in the second reading, Landsberg really is an opponent of Heidegger and an opponent of that idea. The second thesis is that we know of the necessity of our death. We know of the inevitability of death from our own experience. That is, we know it based upon experience. Now that right away becomes paradoxical, or because how can you know that death is a necessity from your experience? Certainly not from your experience of your own death, but your experience of the deaths of others. As he points out, there is a problem in generalizing from our experience of individual instances to a general law. This is quite interesting, actually. Not something he goes into in any real depth, but quite interesting. That is, we all know that everything dies, but we know it on the basis of our experience. But how do we know that death is a necessity based upon our experience? Everything that's ever existed organically up to this moment has died. But does that mean that death is a necessity? This is a well-known problem of induction in philosophy. Number 2, what is Shaler's idea of death? Well, Shaler's idea of death is that death is aging. Death is the experience of aging, which he characterizes as the narrowing of the horizons as we get older, where the future shrinks, the past grows. And as a result of that, our freedom shrinks, because the range of possibilities of what we can actually do in our lives shrinks. Now, of course, he rejects Shaler's idea as being the answer that he's looking for, because this experience of death being the experience of aging is not universal. Because, of course, not everybody lives long enough to age. So Landsberg, I think, has a lot of respect for Shaler's idea, but that we have to look elsewhere for a more essential idea of death, not just death, but the experience of death. Number 3, what is our dual experience of death? See page 195. That is that we experience death, or we imagine that we experience death, from the first person point of view with regard to our own deaths, but we, of course, also experience the deaths of others. Number 4, on page 196, Landsberg says, death is very close to me. How so? Well, I think there he is, if you look on page 196, he is laying out something in a summary way, very briefly, something that Hans Jonas does in his essay, The Burden and Blessing of Mortality, that mortality, death is very close to me in the sense that death is possible every moment. And that would be, that would correspond to Jonas's burden. but that death is a possibility at every moment is what Landsberg means by death. Is very close to me. But in that passage, Landsberg also refers to the other idea of death. That death, I know that I will someday die. So you're kind of in the same space there, Landsberg and Jonas. Number 5 is an artifact from an old earlier version of this class. I can't even remember myself. I'll say I should have taken it out. Don't worry about number 5. Number 6, why does Landsberg associate awareness of death with being a person or individual? This is a quite important part of the essay. It is the substance of section 3 of the essay, right? Very, very important idea that this is, what page is this? Page 196, the very bottom. He says, we may therefore observe a historical phenomenon which is so general that it may be adduced as a law. An awareness of death goes hand in hand with human individualization, the constitution of the person. This individualization is not primarily the acquisition of a clear, more defined awareness of personal singularity. It's first of all the fact that man does really gain in singularity. A change of awareness presupposes a change of being. Thus, it is not primarily the awareness of an individual death which grows more intense, but rather the sense of menace of such death. The individual endows it with a content proper to him alone. That is, that when we become more aware of ourselves as individuals, we become more aware of the menace or threat of death, because death takes on a new significance and value, because it's not just another member of the group that is wiped out by death, a member that can be replaced in their social world by somebody else. It's a unique individual. So death now is a much more significant event because it wipes out or threatens to wipe out a unique person, a unique, irreplaceable person, so that you really can't be aware of the true nature of death until you become a unique individual person. This idea of the person, the unique individual. But you can also, it also goes the other way. You're not really aware of yourself as a unique individual person until you're aware of the threat of death. So it's really two-sided. Very important idea. Number 7, Landsberg says on page 199, quote, that the death of one's neighbor is infinitely more than just the death of another. Why? Well, I don't know if he really spells that out anywhere, but it is certainly it's certainly there's suggestions of really what he means all through this section. It's right here where he says the death of one's neighbor is infinitely more than just the death of the other. And he does say, the death of a man we love. It's really love. That is, the experience of death, the death of the other, becomes revelatory of the nature of death when the experience is also one of love and community. Because, of course, it is the death of the person that we love that well, this is the number 10. How are we led into an experiential knowledge of our own mortality? Well, because the death of the loved one is also a kind of an internal death for us, because our community with this person has been shattered. So he's suggesting that we experience death through the death of the other. But what's vital is that there's this love relationship, so that we truly feel that part of us has died too. We'll get back to that. Number 8, according to Landsberg, why is each death unique? Well, because each person is unique. And that's again, going back to the idea that the difference between a human being who's simply a kind of a not yet become a person, In earlier stages, you might say, of human evolution and human social evolution, each death was not unique. We died like animals, but once we become individual persons, each one of our deaths is also unique because we are unique. Number 9, what does Landsberg mean by the truly moldable structure of our terrestrial existence? Well, this is fairly complicated, and it has to do with person and body. Our terrestrial existence is our earthly existence. Remember, this is written from a Christian point of view, so our terrestrial existence should be contrasted with our non-terrestrial existence, I suppose, which would be our existence in whatever form after death. Although that's really one of the things that's in question here. A human being is a complex being, and one could certainly go back to Plato and think about the relationship between body and soul. You might say our person, the language that he uses is body and person. That our personhood is our unique individual self, but that self is dependent upon a functioning body, and so we have layers or a structure here. If we go back to number 10, I just want to, we've already talked about this, but the end of that question suggests how this relates to Epicurus. Epicurus would no doubt deny that through being with the person, even the loved one who has died, going through their process of dying and then being with them after they've died, or not being with them after they died because they disappeared. But I think Epicurus would deny that gives us any kind of experiential knowledge of our own mortality. So I think for Epicurus, that would be a highly questionable claim. Number 11, how is it that I experience death in the very core of my own existence? Well, I mean, again, that's going through the experience of being with the dying loved one. He says here, my community with this person seems shattered, but the community was to some degree myself, and to this degree I experienced death. In the very core of my own existence, it is the experience of death and the solitude that follows loss. This notion of death as the shattering of community, the isolation, the threat to isolate the individual from the community to which he belongs. Finally, according to Landsberg, why is purgatory such an important concept? Well, it's the idea of purgatory is important for Landsberg because he believes it's a way for the living to still feel like they have some contact with the dead. If they can pray for them, if they have this feeling that they can connect with them through their prayers to, get them through purgatory, I guess. It's a kind of a link that is sort of warmth, to overcome the coldness of death, that the dead in some way are still connected with the living.